Abyssal, Murmurs. Today, we delve into the next horror story, titled The Chaotic World. In this tale, we encounter the adversities of life, such as a world in turmoil, where humanity turns against one another. Just as Ingrid was deep in sleep, her mother called her to wake up. "Wake up, get up and help your father carry water." Ingrid rolled over lazily, responding, "Call Selina instead. Let me sleep a bit longer." Ingrid's mother gave her a few gentle taps, urging her, "If you don't hurry, by noon there won't be enough water to flush the toilet." Despite feeling annoyed, Ingrid had no choice but to sit up and head outside. It was quite noisy outside. She stood on the porch and asked, "Why is everyone fetching water, Mom?" "There's no well to draw from." Daisy was preparing water containers while sighing. "I don't understand why the well has run dry this morning. There's not a single drop left, and it's not just our village. That's strange. Anyway, let's talk about that later. Hurry and go. If you don't make it to the stream, there won't be water, and we'll all be in trouble." "Yes, Mom." Ingrid hooked up her water buckets to the cart and followed her father. Outside, everyone in the village seemed to be in a hurry. Without water, it would be disastrous. After a few hours of carrying, there was finally enough water to last a few days. Father and son sat down on the porch to rest, and Daisy brought out some snacks for them. Roderick took a swig of water and continued, "I'm exhausted. Who knows when we'll have water again?" Daisy looked out to the yard, sighing. "Without water, how can we slaughter the pig? No pig, no money for food." She turned to Ingrid and said, "Are you going back to the city tomorrow afternoon?" "Yes, Mom. Make sure to help carry water so your dad can slaughter the pig. Got it? Every little bit helps." "But you two shouldn't slaughter the pig either. It's kind of gross to think about." Daisy picked up a pair of flip-flops and tossed them straight at Ingrid. "What's so gross about it? Our family has been doing this forever. Without this trade, how would you and your siblings afford your education?" Ingrid quickly caught the flip-flop, her mouth twisting into a crooked smile. "Just wait until my siblings graduate. They'll take care of you. That day is still far off, my dear. If it comes too soon, one of them might bring home a son-in-law or daughter-in-law, and I'll end up raising them." From afar, Selina brought over a tray of food, her face beaming with joy. "The food is here. Let's eat." The tray contained 4 bowls of delicious-smelling chicken. Roderick slurped a spoonful and praised, "Absolutely delicious. Selina's chicken is indeed the best. If I don't go to school anymore, can you give me money to open a food stand?" "I'll earn money to support you." Daisy panicked and interjected, No. Just focus on your studies and then get married. That's what I need." Selina made a face at Daisy, and then everyone began to eat. They truly were a happy family. The next morning, Ingrid was called to wake up again, but this time even earlier, around 4 a.m. to fetch water for her father to slaughter the pig and take to the market. When she returned with the water, there were 2 more men waiting at the market. Roderick told his son, "Go ahead and sleep. You'll need it for your trip back to the city this afternoon." "No, I won't sleep anymore. I don't know why, but last night the owls were hooting so loudly. It's probably because old Magnus's cow died last night. I don't understand why a healthy cow just fell over dead." Ingrid was quietly sitting and watching her father and others slaughter the pig. The fat pig was being brought down from the truck. Its legs were tightly bound. Roderick sharpened his knife a few more times and then approached the pig that was lying there. The two other guys were struggling to hold it down, and Roderick plunged the sharp knife straight into its throat. It let out a terrifying squeal, and with one stroke, it wasn't completely dead, so Roderick had to stab a few more times. Blood sprayed out from its neck, and its eyes rolled back. Suddenly, Ingrid felt a wave of fear. It wasn't the first time she had seen such a scene, but today it made her skin crawl. Unable to bear it any longer, Ingrid stood up quickly, went inside, and lay down on her bed, unable to sleep as the image of the pig being killed kept swirling in her mind. It was so brutal. Now everyone was butchering it outside, marking the end of an animal's life. In the afternoon, the whole family had an early dinner so that Ingrid and her brother could go back to the city. Their parents had prepared a bunch of food for the two siblings, including the pork from this morning's slaughter. On the way, the two siblings chatted with each other to pass the time, and Ingrid teased his sister about something, causing Selina to pinch him. Ingrid turned around to poke fun back. Suddenly, Selina screamed, "Be careful! Watch out!" Ingrid panicked and turned around. Right in front of him was a bicycle that he couldn't make out clearly, almost crashing into him. Ingrid slammed on the brakes, and the bike skidded and fell over to the curb. The two siblings quickly stood up and looked around, both stammering. Selina spoke first. Clearly, they were right in front of us. "I saw them riding towards us." Ingrid stammered. I saw too. But if it was a ghost, why was it so clear? I don't know. The person appeared so clearly. I thought it was someone." Then the two siblings hurriedly straightened up their bike and left in a hurry. They had been traveling this road for so long, they couldn't understand why they were being teased by a ghost like that. On the way back to the city, neither of them said a word to each other. A week later, they forgot about the incident because whenever they told someone, they would say it was just nonsense. Now, it was the time for the full moon of the 7th month. Everyone was busy buying offerings in advance for worship. That day, Ingrid also went shopping for offerings. Although he was a boy, he had his own beliefs, and every time the full moon approached, he would go to the temple to pray for his family's well-being. That day he met the abbot and had a conversation with him. "Master, there is something I have never encountered before, and I have just encountered it." "Go ahead and speak." Ingrid recounted his encounter with a ghost. The story that he was told was nonsense by everyone. The abbot listened and then replied, "Do you know the 7th month? The day the gates of hell will open and will close after one day." "Yes, I know, sir. But this time, the gates of hell will remain open for quite a while." "How long is quite a while, sir?" "Until those who need to descend into hell must go, regardless of age, male or female." Ingrid felt quite anxious and asked again, "How can we avoid that, Master?" "It is a divine secret. The world is chaotic, and people are like ghosts, and ghosts are like people." MPT. After that, Ingrid returned to his rented room, and on the way he kept thinking about what the Master had said. Today was the full moon of the 7th month, and that evening the entire boarding house where Ingrid lived was holding the full moon ceremony. No matter how small or big, Ingrid was the same, waiting for the incense to burn out when suddenly a lightning bolt streaked across the sky. It was very strange, not branching out, just a line straight from the sky to the ground. Ingrid looked and murmured, "What kind of lightning is this? I have never seen anything like it before." Not even 5 minutes after the lightning struck, hail began to fall, with stones like marbles that grew larger. Everyone hurried to gather their offerings. Even the spirit money that was being burned was abandoned in the confusion. Just as the hail stopped, it immediately started pouring down hard, accompanied by a swirling wind. If anyone had a sight of yin and yang, they would see outside that hungry ghosts were still diligently collecting food in the rain. The ground cracked open, forming a large chasm as the fire of hell melted. The vengeful spirits and wronged souls rushed up. Yes, today the gates of hell officially opened. Chaos was about to happen. What would humanity face now? Ingrid, besides studying, also has to work part-time, coming from a poor family. There's no way she could afford tuition without an additional job. The noodle shop she works at has quite a lot of customers, and she has been working there for some time now. The new staff keep changing often, and while she was preparing the food and chatting with the new employee, a customer came in. With just a glance, Ingrid knew this was a regular, so she said to the new employee, "Go invite the customer in. You're only good at chatting." Dulcie chuckled and quickly ran out to ask, "Hi there, what can I get you?" The young woman looked at Dulcie and ordered, "I'll have a bowl of rare and well-done beef pho, and a bowl of rare beef meatballs without onions." A boy around 4th grade chimed in, "Mom, I want a soft drink too." The young mother smiled tenderly at her son. "Sure, I will get a soda for my darling." She then turned to Dulcie. "Add a no-sugar Coke to that, please." After Dulcie took the order, she hesitated for a moment and asked, Is that all?" "Yes, just that." Dulcie then went to the back to inform Ingrid, "1 bowl of rare and well-done beef pho, 1 rare beef meatball pho." After hearing this, Ingrid quickly got to work making the pho. Dulcie shook her head. Why did that lady come in with 3 people, but only order 2 dishes? She's not going to feed that poor little girl. She looks so frail. Ingrid just smiled and said, "There might be a reason, or maybe the girl is sick and can't eat. Go wash some bean sprouts. I'll bring them out later." "Yes, ma'am." After Dulcie got the Coke, she went to wash the bean sprouts. Ingrid brought out the 2 bowls of pho and went back in, saying to Dulcie, "Hey, where's that little girl?" Dulcie's eyes widened as she protested, but I saw her with my own eyes. That little girl was looking at me with sad eyes. She probably went to get something. As they were about to finish their meals, it was time for Dulcie to change shifts and a new worker came in. When Dulcie walked out, she wondered. Clearly, the girl was still sitting there, not thinking about it anymore. Dulcie hopped on her bike and took off. At that moment, the woman called out, "Time to settle the bill." Ingrid ran out. "That will be 5 USD. The woman took out the money and handed Ingrid 5 USD, then took her son's hand and led him away. "Let's go home now, sweetie." Ingrid was watching to see where the little girl that Dulcie mentioned had gone. Just as the woman took about 5 steps, the figure of the little girl appeared and followed them. It didn't fade in and out like a ghost or resemble any kind of mist. It was clearly the form of a person, but the way it appeared made it certain that it wasn't human. Ingrid trembled, beads of sweat forming on her forehead, thinking to herself, could it be that ghosts now have such terrifying abilities? It's impossible to tell the difference between a ghost and a person. After finishing her shift, Ingrid went back to her rented room, had something to eat, and then rested, as she had classes in the afternoon. Today, it was her turn to go to the market and cook. While she was busy, the phone rang. Ingrid quickly washed her hands and answered. "I'm listening, Mom. Have you eaten yet?" "I'm preparing it, Mom." I'll send over 2 chickens and some food. Let Selina handle the chickens, and then you go get them, okay? Yes, I got it, Mom. It's funny how there's a son in the house who's never dared to kill a chicken or anything. You finish your studies and get married already, so I can be happy, or I'll die without any grandchildren. Mom, come on. All right, I'm hanging up now. Yes. Ingrid hung up with a smile, planning to introduce her girlfriend to her parents in a few months to make them happy. 6 months later, the weather began to gradually shift towards rainstorms. I don't understand why the storms came so early this year. The sky wasn't completely filled with dark gray clouds. There were patchy clouds, and some even had various colors. It looked almost like rainbow clouds, extremely beautiful, and at times the clouds turned red as well. All these strange phenomena were things he had never seen before. Birds flew chaotically across the sky. After running a bit more, Ingrid finally arrived at Selina's dormitory, parked outside, and walked into the room. He exclaimed, "Are you ready? Let's go." Selina had changed her clothes and was wearing a mask, but her eyes looked red and puffy. Ingrid curiously asked, "Did someone tease you? Why are you crying?" "No, it's nothing, brother. Let's go." "All right, let's go." Yes, they went downstairs together. Today, they received their salary, so Ingrid wanted to take his sister out for something nice to eat. They stopped at a crowded barbecue place, and after ordering, Ingrid grilled food for his sister. "Here, let me give you the first piece. It smells so good." Selina was still staring off into space, her mind lost in thought. After calling her several times, she finally turned back. "Yes, brother. What's wrong with you? Did that Mortimer tease you?" "No, it's nothing. Brother, can I borrow 1 million VND? I'll pay you back in half a month when I get my salary." Ingrid spoke as he reached into his wallet to take out the money for his sister. "Here, this is a loan for you. This is for you." Ingrid handed Selina a total of 1.5 million VND, and Selina quickly took it and put it in her bag. "Thank you, brother. By the way, you look really pale. If something's wrong, you need to tell me, okay?" "Yes, I'm fine. Just focus on grilling the food. It's burning already. Here. The 2 siblings enjoyed their meal immensely. After eating, he took his sister back to her dorm while he returned to his own place. Upon arriving at his room, his roommate had not yet returned. Selina, feeling exhausted, flopped down onto her bed and checked her phone. So many missed calls, so many urgent messages. After that, Selina tossed her phone aside, placed her hand on her belly, and thought to herself, "This baby, should I keep it or should I let it go?" The stormy season had also arrived, just at the time when Ingrid and his siblings were in exams, so they couldn't go back to their hometown. He always called home to check on his parents. "Mom, have you and Dad moved to higher ground yet? I see the storm is strong, and the water is rising quickly." Roderick replied calmly, "We're all done, son. Everyone was moved to the house of the village leader. So you don't need to worry. Just focus on your studies." "Yes, hearing that makes me feel at ease. You and Dad stay there until the water recedes completely. We know. We'll have dinner now. The village leader is making some delicious instant noodles." "Yes, okay." They turned off the machine, and Ingrid felt relieved to continue studying for the exam in 2 days. At that moment, back at Roderick's house, the water had risen quite high, and the couple had put on life jackets and clung to the house's pillar. Daisy exclaimed loudly, "Why didn't you tell me?" We already have life jackets, so what's there to worry about? Well, if you let them worry, how can that be? Daisy looked down at the pitch-black water, the sky darkening, and the water kept rising, crying. It's such a pity that the rice is still not sold. It's all drifting away. Where will we find money for our child's education? Roderick struggled to push the roof tiles away, using a flashlight to signal for help. Only those who experience flooding can understand the hardships of those living in flood-prone areas. They were soaked in water for hours, shivering with cold, their lips turning blue and their faces pale. After a long while, they finally saw a canoe approaching. Roderick flashed the flashlight and shouted. In the end, they managed to get out of the house, which now could only be seen from the roof. They were taken to schools in higher areas to escape the flood. A few days later, the water began to recede. Everyone returned home to clean up and push the mud away. At that time, at the house of the team leader, he held a handful of money, counting and recording. Mr. Jocelyn's house gets 10 USD. Mr. Bellamy's house gets 10 USD. Edna, Augustus's wife, was stuffing instant noodles into a bag and said, "What do you mean by 10 USD for the house? Aren't we counting the instant noodles and rice too? What's left after that? Are you stupid? Just eat a little and leave some for the children." They give each household 20 USD, one box of noodles, and a 10 kg bag of rice. We can give 10 USD, 10 packs of noodles, and a 5 kg bag of rice. What more can we cut down? Be reasonable. Just get to work. We still have to distribute it to the households. Augustus continued to write down the records. Since he became the team leader, every time there was a storm or flood, he and his wife received a significant amount of extra funds. This two-story, solid house was built from flood relief money. Edna had just packed the noodles, and she even trimmed one package to satisfy her desire. Wanting to buy rice at a cheaper price, Augustus had ordered a truck from outside instead of buying it nearby. That night, the truck arrived, and the couple had to drive out themselves to pay the driver, settling the full payment only when the goods were delivered to their house. After checking the goods, they set off ahead to guide the truck, which followed behind. While driving smoothly, the driver suddenly yelled, "Back up, there's a landslide." Back up! The couple barely had time to look up at the scene. They couldn't run away due to their regret over the newly bought scooter. Boom! Soil and gravel quickly fell down, burying the couple along with the new scooter. They were eventually found. The couple had met a tragic end. Their eye sockets and ears were filled with mud, and especially their mouths were full of dirt. Their limbs were broken and severed. Edna looked on. She was somewhat spared, but Augustus was horrifying. A large rock had fallen onto his head, crushing it, blending his brain with the dirt. The sight was so grotesque that anyone who looked could not help but run away to vomit. Anyone with a weak disposition would be haunted for a week. The bodies of Mr. Augustus and his wife were brought home, and their children gathered around crying, some of them in shock. Neighbors also waded through the water to see how the couple had died, as the rumors were quite frightening. The forensic team checked, and then told Mortimer, the eldest son, "This stomach is hard and swollen like this. There's surely a lot of mud and dirt inside." While crying, Mortimer asked, "How do you flush it out?" "You have to cut it open and flush it out. The dead can't be flushed out the usual way." "So how much is that going to cost?" "About a few million." "All right then." Before Mortimer could finish speaking, Grain, his wife, nudged him. She interjected, "Just let's discuss it among ourselves first." Okay, that's fine. If there's anything, call me. We'll be leaving now. Once they returned home, Mortimer asked Grain, "Why did you stop me? Are you out of your mind to spend that much money? Either way, your parents are already dead. Let's find someone to do it cheaper." "Find who to do it cheaper?" "Let me discuss it with Jocasta and her husband." Grain approached Jocasta, who was sitting there, devastated, and shared her idea. Jocasta agreed, and eventually they went to find the village butcher. More than an hour later, Jethro arrived. He specialized in slaughtering livestock. His face was somewhat grim and gloomy. When he got close to the two corpses, he sat beside them and took out his tools, a sharp, pointed butcher's knife. Before beginning, Jethro asked, "Are you sure you want me to start?" "Yes, we're sure." Jethro began to tear open Mr. Augustus's shirt. Though it had been rinsed clean of mud, some remnants still lingered. The blade pierced the abdomen, going straight down to the navel. The liquid that poured out was a mixture of muddy water and thick blood. As Jethro spread the skin apart, small eels began to wriggle out, crawling onto the ground. Anyone who saw it was struck with fear. Jocasta, weak-hearted, quickly ran away to vomit. Even Jethro was startled. Despite his profession, it was his first time witnessing such a scene. He blurted out, "How could those eels get inside the stomach so quickly? It's shocking." Then Jethro took a hose and began to wash out the insides. Habitually, he rubbed around a little. The more he rinsed, the clearer the intestines became. Jethro's eyes widened in astonishment. "Oh my God, come here and see this." Hearing Jethro's call, everyone waiting on the porch quickly rushed out. They all stood there, eyes wide in disbelief, goosebumps rising on their skin, shivering slightly. Inside the entrails, the eels had gnawed in a disgusting manner. It was beyond horrifying. Mortimer, considered the strongest in the family, still felt nauseated and ran away to vomit. No one dared to go closer. Jethro chuckled and teased, "You're the children. Why are you disgusted seeing your parents like this?" "I slaughter pigs, and when the blood flows, as well as the waste covers my floor, I don't feel sick at all." Mortimer stood at a distance and called back, "Come on, help me out quickly." "Got it." While Mr. Jethro was stitching up the corpse of Mr. Augustus, and then continued to autopsy, Mrs. Edna, Mortimer, and Jocasta began to discuss. Mortimer spoke up. "With the flood like this, how can we bury them?" Jocasta immediately agreed. "That's true. We should wait until the water recedes to bury them. After all, we can take a few days. When they prepare the bodies, we can ask them to do it properly." "I know," Grain interjected. "Let me go. Consult a fortune teller first. See which day is good for the burial. If it's not good, we have to cremate them. We can't just bury them haphazardly and lose our family blessings." Jocasta disagreed. "No cremation, please. If we do that, we're left with just a handful of ashes. Our parents have died tragically already, and now they're being autopsied. They deserve a proper burial." Grain hesitated and then stated her decision. "Well, tonight we'll call Beavis over and sift through to see where our parents' assets are hidden, so we'll know how to divide it." Jocasta found this reasonable, but her sister-in-law was already talking about dividing the inheritance, which made Jocasta slightly annoyed. "Why the rush? My parents have just passed away. Their bodies haven't even been prepared yet." Grain, feeling uncomfortable with Jocasta's comment, replied, "If you don't look now, you'll blame my husband and me for hiding their wealth later." Wouldn't that be unfair to us? Fine, I'll call Anatole back. As the work finished, Mr. Jethro stood up, washed his hands, cleaned his tools, and called out loudly, "It's done now. Calculate my fee so I can go home." Grain hurried over to count the payment, handing him 30 USD. Mr. Jethro disagreed. "This job is even harder than slaughtering a pig. It should be 1,000,000. But we initially agreed on 30 USD. So now you want it done cheaply? Or should I go cut the fishing line and let everything spill out?" Grain frowned in irritation, but dug out another 300K and handed it to Mr. Jethro. After receiving the money, Mr. Jethro hopped on his beat-up motorcycle and rode off, immediately spitting out contemptuously, "What a hell of a place. How could it lead to such tragic deaths? I'm off to make a bowl of pig's blood soup to warm myself up." The old motorcycle sputtered noisily until it disappeared. At this point, Mortimer's family called the funeral service to handle their tasks. Later that evening, they managed to find 4 taels of gold and several tens of millions. Then there were the property documents and land papers, and they began to divide it up. Jocasta spoke up first. "Although I am the younger child, we should divide the inheritance from our parents equally." Grain jumped up, refusing. "How can you divide it equally?" "Mortimer, as the eldest son, should get a bigger share since he's the one who worships our parents." "Who made Mortimer responsible for that? Let my husband and I take care of it." "A girl can't worship her parents. She can only worship her husband." Jocasta and her husband became furious, wanting to argue with Grain. But Mortimer intervened. "Enough already. It's late. Everyone shut up. The assets will be divided equally. No more discussion." Grain still wouldn't back down and raised her voice. "But you still have a son. What will be done about that?" "You keep quiet. Male or female, it's the same. Disperse." The next morning, after waking up, Grain went down to the kitchen to prepare breakfast for her husband and children. As she turned on the light, she was momentarily startled. Then she cursed. "Damn it, who's so careless to step in here with muddy shoes like this?" A thoughtless person like... Early in the morning, Grain was already annoyed as she went to fetch the mop. Soon after, relatives started to gather for the funeral of her parents. The first day was manageable, but in the following days, stranger occurrences began to happen, causing Grain to panic and take little Otis to Mortimer. "Hey, look at this. Look at little Otis's arms and legs." "What is it?" Grain lifted Otis's shirt and pants, revealing bruises in the shape of fingers as if someone had gripped him. Mortimer frowned as he examined it closely, while Grain was frightened to tears. "What should we do? I'm sure it's my dad coming back to play with Otis. When he was alive, he loved to hold his hands and feet like that." What Grain said, Mortimer couldn't refute. He knew that was the way his dad liked to tease his grandchild. Could it really be that their parents died tragically and were now haunting the family? Mortimer tried to reassure her. "Let's just put some oil on him. Maybe my dad misses his grandchild and is just playing." Grain complied and took Otis upstairs, carefully spreading garlic throughout the room, from the main door to the windows. That night, Mortimer was sleeping when he saw his parents standing at the front door, looking in. He could see them clearly. They were covered in mud. Suddenly, the sound of things clattering in the kitchen startled him. He opened his eyes and sat up, noticing that the incense on the coffin had gone out long ago. He hurried to light the incense and asked those around him if anyone was making noise in the kitchen, but everyone looked confused. Mortimer then went downstairs to turn on the lights. The floor was still marked with muddy footprints, and there were even marks on the refrigerator and the stove. A chill ran down his spine, goosebumps covered his arms, and waves of cold made him shiver. He quickly grabbed a cloth, fearful that everyone would see and be scared, then returned to lie beside the coffin. He lay there, too afraid to sleep. The next day, they all sat together. Jocasta shared what she had experienced with Mortimer and his wife. Grain then discussed with everyone, "My parents died tragically, so they're likely restless. They might come back for their children." Jocasta stammered. "So, what should we do?" Grain reassured her. "I'll go see a fortune teller. Maybe we can find a way to resolve this." Now everyone was in a state of panic, so they entrusted everything to Grain. Grain had just driven a little way out of the house when little Epiphyllum from the back house called her. "Grain, Grain, I have something to tell you." "What is it?" "Not now. I'm busy. Just a quick word. Hurry up. I'm in a rush. Your house is haunted." Hearing this, Grain felt a chill. She didn't need anyone to tell her. She already knew her home was haunted. She asked, "Why? Why do you say that?" 2 days ago, I was watching soccer until 2 a.m., and when I went out to pee, I saw Grandma Edna's ghost standing in your kitchen." Grain hastily denied it. "Stop talking nonsense. It's true. It's true. I've seen her for 2 or 3 days, so yesterday I took a picture." Saying this, Epiphyllum handed a blurry photo to Grain. Grain gasped, her mind momentarily blank, because the blurry image indeed resembled her mother-in-law. But she still tried to deny it and ran off. "Your phone is broken. Just throw it away." Epiphyllum stood there, confused as Grain left. After a while, she returned to inform everyone. "The fortune teller said that if you place a curse, then my parents won't be able to reincarnate. But if we bury the coffin and pour concrete over it, then my parents will be barred from CA and will go down for reincarnation." Everyone agreed, and on the day of the burial, they hired workers to pour concrete over the grave. When asked, they said was to prevent rain and storms from damaging the coffin. No one knew anything except for Grain, who understood that pouring concrete was even worse than placing a curse. Recently, the water supply has suddenly dried up. Some days we have water, some days we don't. To use it, we have to take turns watching the water at night. Fortunately, Ingrid is always cautious, so there is always drinking water in the dorm room. Coming home from work, she saw Augustus, her roommate, squatting on the road to keep watch over the water, looking at the trickle of water flowing, which is less than a lizard's pee. "Goodness, when will this be stable again? Damn it, I've been sitting here for nearly 3 hours. My butt is sore, and I've only managed to store enough water for a few days. At least I was smart enough to ask for some big water jugs to take home from work. Otherwise, I'd be in trouble back in my hometown. We also suffered from water shortages and had to go to the river and streams, straining our backs. In the countryside, it's better that way. If there's no well water, we can go to the river or streams or catch rainwater. But in this city, suffering is the only choice. Well, you keep watching. I'm going to cook." Saying that, Ingrid patted Augustus on the shoulder, then took her bag of food back to their room. Looking at the 10 containers of drinking water, Augustus felt a sense of comfort. Aspiring to be a doctor one day, he understood the importance of water sources. Although they had tap water, he still boiled it twice at 100 degrees, let it cool, and then stored it in bottles for later use. Lately, for some reason, Ingrid kept encountering strange occurrences. Not just her, but many others too, as if the yin and yang were coexisting in one. Ingrid was naturally superstitious, so every night before sleeping, she would burn incense in front of the dormitory. Recently, he had gone home for 3 days to help his parents store water, and before leaving, he always reminded Augustus to light the incense. That night, he lay asleep when he felt a chill in the room and an uneasy sensation. He turned to ask Augustus, "When I was back home, did you burn the incense?" "I did, don't worry." After saying that, Augustus began to snore, the sound steady, like a saw cutting wood. Ingrid had gotten used to the sound of snoring, and after a while, she too fell asleep. In a dreamlike state, she saw someone sitting by her desk, with long hair and dressed in white, the dim light from the window casting a faint glow. Looking at the figure's silhouette, she guessed that the person was young, with bright red eyes staring directly at her. And one more thing, it felt as if the person just came up from the water, dripping wet. The lips moved, mumbling, "The world is in chaos. It's chaotic. With a pure mind, peace will come." The person kept repeating that over and over. Suddenly there was a loud clatter, jolting her awake. The sound was very clear, very loud, right by her feet. A chill ran through her as she thought about what could have fallen in the room at this hour. While lost in thought, it fell again. Ingrid was so scared that she shook Augustus awake. "Augustus, Augustus, do you hear that sound?" "Groggy," Augustus snapped. "What sound?" "Shut up, I'm trying to sleep." Augustus fell back asleep, while the thing that had fallen felt very close to her feet. She gathered her courage to lean down, stretching her foot to see if she touched anything. If she touched something, she would probably die of fright. Fortunately, after touching around, she found nothing, and her heart began to beat normally again. Perhaps she had encountered too many strange things recently, which had left her feeling haunted. Although Augustus reassured her, she still felt a bit scared. Ingrid turned over and hugged Augustus for comfort. Just as her hand reached him, she quickly recoiled. She had just touched someone's cold, damp skin. At that moment, she felt like she wanted to scream. She had lived in this dormitory for so long and couldn't understand why a guest had visited so unexpectedly tonight. In the end, Ingrid didn't dare to sleep anymore. She just clasped her hands in prayer until she gradually drifted into slumber. The next morning, Augustus woke up and called Ingrid to get up as well. "Get up, get up. Breakfast is ready, and you have school too." Ingrid, tired, rolled over and over. "I want to sleep a bit more." "What the hell did you do all night that you're this sluggish in the morning?" "Did you light incense while I was home?" Augustus hesitated. "Well, I mean, yes." "Did you or did you not? Be clear about it." "No." "Damn it, you even forgot that." "Then you went home, so I went over to my girlfriend's flat to sleep." "Come on, get up." Augustus stood up and looked out the window, noticing some water left on the table. Augustus complained. "Did it rain last night? Why is there so much water like this?" Ingrid jumped up quickly, like a spring, looking at the water pooled on the table, which wasn't clear and had some mud mixed in. He turned around and looked at the wall. There was also some dampness on the wall, and Ingrid started to panic. Seeing Ingrid's face, Augustus frowned and asked, "Why does your face look so bad?" Ingrid began to recount what had happened to him the night before. Augustus, being someone who didn't believe in superstitions, laughed heartily and teased him. "Come on, you're haunted by all that spiritual nonsense. Get up, it's almost time." Knowing Augustus didn't believe, Ingrid also didn't care. Over a month passed, and water completely ran out. They had to save as much as possible. The rivers and streams were drying up. Living in the city, it was the first time he saw the rivers recede so drastically. Those who could store water did so, and those who couldn't risk going down to the river to draw some. Ingrid looked at the scene and felt disheartened. The chaos was terrifying, with crops dying and even livestock lacking the strength to live. He called home, dialing his mother every 2 days. "Hello, is this Ingrid? Mom, is there any water at home?" "There's not a drop, dear. At this rate, we'll starve to death or die of thirst and embrace each other in despair. There's no water in the streams either, Mom. People are rushing to scoop up whatever there is. Even the sea would dry up at this rate, let alone the streams. Good thing I kept telling you to store drinking water. That helps. With this amount, we can last a week, dear." The thing is, hearing his mother say that, he became worried. "What is it, Mom?" "I really want to bathe, dear. I feel like a pigsty at Isolde's house." Hearing his mother complain, he both chuckled and felt pity. Ingrid said, "Mom and Dad, try to conserve it. In a few days, I'll get my salary and buy clean water for you." "Okay, take care of Selina too, all right?" "Yes, Mom. I'll hang up now." Fortunately, he was always thoughtful, so his sister had enough drinking water. Just as he was about to stand up to cook, Augustus came home from work, and as soon as he stepped in, he whined. "What a time we live in. Water costs more than diamonds, you know. I just stopped by Cosima's at the corner to buy a pack of cigarettes. She sold a 5-liter bottle of aqua water for $1 million, nearly 10 times the price. That's outrageous. She said it's the general situation, and we're about to lose power too. I heard the announcement already." Ingrid looked at Augustus, sighing in despair. "Lose water, plus losing power. How can we stand it? I might as well just jump into the river for a bath." Ingrid watched Augustus walk into the bathroom and couldn't help but laugh. The next day, the power was still out, and they were enduring the hot and stuffy weather. Augustus was lying down reading the news when he exclaimed, "Wow, can you believe it? The fish are floating, covering the entire river's surface." "Where?" "Let me see." Ingrid looked at the screen of her phone and saw the desolate scene. The fishermen were crying, unable to do anything. He exclaimed, "It's really pitiful, but I can't help at all. Tomorrow, I'm going back to the countryside. Remember to light incense for me." "I know." Ingrid stood up, took some money, and went out to Cosima's store. He had just received his salary, so he bought some clean water for his parents. Fortunately, he was able to find an extra job just to have enough to cover his expenses. Seeing the scene of people scrambling for water made him panic. He approached and called out, "Cosima, can I get 2 bottles of water, please?" Cosima said her husband would carry 2 bottles of water out to give to Ingrid. Since he was a regular customer at this small grocery store, Cosima favored him. He took out $2 million and handed it over. "Here you go. Why only this much? $3 million is needed." "Ha, you said it was $1 million per bottle before. That was then, and this is now. You want it or not. It's hard to come by. I'll take just 1 bottle, please." Cosima took the money but was clearly displeased. He carried the water bottle back to his room to store it, intending to bring it back to his parents the next day. The following day, Ingrid drove Selina home together. On the way, they encountered heavy traffic and the scene of people pushing each other to buy water, even fighting to the point of bleeding, was alarming. Selina looked on, terrified. What a shocking sight, huh? Ingrid said nothing, unsure if this was indeed the chaotic era, as the ghost had mentioned. Walking along the village road, the two siblings felt scared as they looked at the surroundings. The trees and grass were withered, the fields were parched, and the stench of decaying animal carcasses filled the air, making Ingrid and her brother hurry past those spots. After a while, they managed to get home and saw their parents sitting dejectedly fanning themselves on the porch, looking truly pitiful. Despite their fatigue and sorrow, seeing their children return lifted the spirits of Mr. and Mrs. Daisy considerably. Ingrid and Selina brought some items inside and then sat beside their parents. Ingrid asked, "How many days of drinkable water do we have left, Dad?" "Only enough for about 3 or 4 days, alas. I wanted to return to the countryside to bathe in the river or stream, but it seems that won't be possible. Out there, the sight of dead fish and animals is too horrible. It's an environmental disaster." "There's nothing we can do, my child. Without water, people might die, let alone animals." Saying that, Ingrid turned to Mr. Roderick and asked, "Dad, have you slaughtered any pigs in the last few days?" "No, I haven't thought about it for a long time, ever since we ran out of water. I brought some water from the river and stream, but it ran out quickly." "Well, that's okay, Dad. Less killing is a good thing. If I were to slap you, you'd lose your teeth. This killing is what has fed this family over the years. I'll take the stuff inside." Ingrid stood up to bring the items in, while Selina still clung to her mother, relishing the feeling of burying her head in her mother's lap, feeling an inexplicable sense of peace and security. That evening, for some reason, birds were flying chaotically, their calls frantic as though being chased. Suddenly, the sky darkened with swirling clouds, and Mr. Roderick looked up and said to the family, "Let's bring out containers to catch the rain. It looks like it's about to rain soon." The whole family rushed down to grab whatever they could to collect it, filling the yard with their makeshift rain catchers. Then all 4 of them sat together, eating dinner while waiting for the rain. However, after waiting for a long time, when everyone had fallen asleep briefly, the rain began to pour like a deluge, as if threatening to wash away their home. Having not seen rain for so long, or perhaps this was the long-awaited downpour, so everyone sat up to take a peek. The next morning, everyone laboriously carried the collected rainwater into the house. Looking at the pile of water they had gathered, Mr. Roderick was overjoyed. "With this much water, if we use it sparingly, we could last for another 2 weeks." Ingrid chimed in, "I should have come out to bathe last night while it was raining. Up there, I can only manage to wipe myself down with a towel. I smell worse than fermented vinegar. Yikes, you go over there. I'll bring you 2 containers of water to splash." The family burst into laughter. Ingrid reminded, "But Mom and Dad, please refrain from using this rainwater for drinking just yet. Filter it through the machine first. Rainwater can be quite polluted nowadays." Mrs. Daisy playfully smacked Ingrid. "Just because you've studied hard doesn't mean you should be so meticulous. In the countryside, rainwater and river water are perfectly fine, right? Well, if I buy a filter for you, you can use it. It's more than a year's salary for me, you know." I know. By evening, after dinner, the 2 siblings rode back to the city. As soon as they reached their room, the friend boasted, "I collected a bunch of rainwater. Isn't that great? Lucky you. I can finally bathe after heading back to the countryside. I'll be so fresh." The 2 friends looked at each other and laughed like landlords having a bountiful harvest. That night, As Ingrid fell between wakefulness and sleep, she felt someone standing right at her feet, seemingly angry, murmuring, "You cannot use that water. I won't allow it. It's chaos. It's chaos already." Ingrid could hear the sound of water dripping from that ghost, making a noise like tongue. Tongue. Then the ghost pressed its face closer to Ingrid's, getting nearer and nearer, with thick, foul-smelling muddy water flowing from its mouth. It kept dripping quickly onto Ingrid's face, laughing sinisterly. The eerie laughter didn't scare Ingrid as much as the final scream did. As the scream rang out, Ingrid jolted awake. The electricity was still out, and the sky outside was still very dark. He raised his hand to his face and felt something slimy. He quickly scrambled out of bed, intending to go to the bathroom to wash his face. As soon as his feet touched the ground, he felt a cold, damp sensation, slimy and slippery. He shook Augustus awake. "Wake up, wake up. Augustus, hurry." Augustus lazily replied, "Let me sleep. I'm wet. Everything is wet. If you're wet, go change your pants." "It's not that. Hurry up." Augustus finally grabbed the flashlight hanging on the nearby wall, turned it on, and sat up. He irritably asked, "What?" "Look, everything is wet." Augustus shined the flashlight around the room. Water was seeping onto the floor. Then he pointed the beam directly at Ingrid's face, blinding him. Ingrid raised his hand to shield his face. "Damn it, where's all this water from? And why is your face covered in mud?" Ingrid was still trembling and said to his friend, "You should go check, see what this crazy water is." After checking all around, Augustus cursed and swore, "Damn it, the rainwater I collected spilled everywhere, man. There's nothing left." Hearing that, Ingrid was still shaking, his mouth stammering. Is there anything left?" "Just the water we were drinking earlier." Ingrid then began to recount to Augustus what he had just experienced. Even though he didn't want to believe it, looking at his friend's muddy face, he couldn't help but believe it. In the end, they both cleaned up until they finally finished. The next day, Ingrid called Daisy. "Hello, Mom. I'm here." Ingrid hesitated for a moment before asking, "Mom, did anyone in our family die in the flood?" "Yes. There was a young woman who died. She passed away the same day you were born. There was a huge storm that year. I was at the clinic for a few days to give birth, and only later did I hear about her death." "So was her body found, Mom?" "No. The flood swept the body away. We even invited a medium over, but he said she was taken to serve in the Navy." "Ah, okay. Why do you ask?" "No, it's nothing." "Mom." After hanging up the phone, Ingrid sat in contemplation for a long while. Perhaps those times he narrowly escaped death were all thanks to the young woman. It was just a guess, but imagining the ghost of the young woman by his side sent chills down his spine and prickled his skin. That night, Ingrid prepared a fruit offering and stood in front of her rented room to pray. "I bow to you, dear lady. I don't know where your remains are. I thank you for following me and granting me protection. Once I have stable employment, I will find your remains to bury them properly." As soon as 3 incense sticks were placed down, the smoke rose straight up into the sky. The next day it was raining again, and her 2 friends brought out containers to collect the rainwater. This time, the rain was heavier and lasted longer. It rained continuously for 7 days and nights. The rivers and streams filled with water again, and soon enough, electricity was back. After this round of rain, Ingrid carefully observed whether there would be any more leaks. The water stored for drinking was nearly gone. Fortunately, there was still enough to cook instant noodles each morning. At home, the villagers were also happily collecting the rain. The fields were now filled with water, and the animals had something to drink. Today, Roderick went out with a few friends to help with construction at someone else's house. Even if there was no pig to slaughter, he would find some work to support his family. Daisy was still diligently selling her morning rice cakes at the market. Fortunately, her small ramshackle shop had become quite popular over the past few years. Because the water she used was filtered, it was less prone to the unpleasant odor of iron. After pouring the concrete, the workers took a break to drink some water. Roderick filled several cups to quench his thirst, and as soon as the water went down his throat, he recognized it was unfiltered. But working was just like that. It couldn't compare to being at home, plus it wasn't the first time he had drunk such water. After drinking, each person was given a large bowl of noodle soup, so the workers could replenish their energy for the next tasks. More than a month later, while engrossed in reading the news, Ingrid's phone rang. It was his mother's number, and he answered cheerfully. "I'm listening, Mom." On the other end was a panicked voice. "Your father. He collapsed. You should come home. I'm scared." "How long has he been unconscious, Mom?" "He's been out for an hour. I'll arrange to head back right away." Ingrid quickly hung up, and thoughts began swirling in his mind. Could it be that my father is suffering like those others, suddenly fainting, falling down as if the electricity had been cut off? There have been many cases like that lately here, and they remain unclear about the causes. Ingrid hurried home, and when he arrived at the hospital in his hometown, he had to go through procedures like sanitizing and wearing a mask. After that, he went to see his father lying in bed. His mother looked worn out. Seeing her, he asked, "What did the doctor say, Mom?" "They checked him, and there are no signs or symptoms at all." "It's just like he's in a coma," Ingrid reassured her. "Don't worry, Mom. This illness in the city, after 72 hours, he'll wake up." "I'm so worried, my dear. I'm here with you." Ingrid and Daisy stayed at the hospital to take care of his father. There were many people there, suffering like his dad. After more than 2 days, he received a call from the city. It was his younger sister. She must have been worried and called, but on the other end was her roommate. She spoke quickly. "Brother, Selina fainted." "Fainted how, sis?" "Like the others. I'm really scared. Take her to the hospital for me. I'm in the countryside. I'll run back there." "Yes, yes." Ingrid hung up, but didn't tell his mother because he was afraid it would make her worry. "I'm going back to the city. I have something important to do." "All right, go ahead. I'll be here." "Yes, don't worry. Dad will wake up after 72 hours. "Yes, I know," Ingrid reassured his mother, as well as himself. Because there were people who didn't wake up after 72 hours. They just lay there, coughing blood from their nose and mouth, even blood from their ears, silently departing for eternity without getting to say a word to their loved ones. He always hoped his father would be the one to wake up after 72 hours. Ingrid rushed back to the city. Along the way, many people seemed to be standing fine. Suddenly, they collapsed like trees being cut down. The doctors still hadn't found the cause of the strange illness. As he walked, he observed carefully because drivers who suddenly fainted could easily crash into each other. Ingrid stayed by his sister's side, constantly watching the clock, waiting for calls from his mother. 72 hours. 73 hours. 74 hours. Time passed, but his gut churned with anxiety, just hoping that both his father and sister would be safe. Finally, the phone rang, and his mother informed him that his dad had regained his senses. Ingrid was very happy. Now he could only pray for his sister's safety. After 72 hours, his sister also woke up, and upon seeing her brother, Selina asked, "Brother, it's good that you're awake. How do you feel?" Selina sat up, as if just waking from a deep sleep. There were no signs of illness or deep coma. Her voice and tone were still alert. "I'm completely fine, still healthy. Do you feel tired or have trouble breathing?" Selina pouted and shook her head afterward. The siblings settled the hospital bill and went home together. "Lately, it seems like everyone is affected by it, just like a pandemic, and the Ministry of Health has suggested that everyone stay indoors. They are investigating the air quality. Miss Agnes, Ingrid's landlady, is very kind. She doesn't charge the poor students like us for rent. And on top of that, she cooks meals like bun can or bun, Vietnamese noodles. She makes a big pot, and anyone living there can just bring a bowl down to eat. Today, Mrs. Agnes cooked a delicious vegetarian bun, and Ingrid initiated a conversation. Miss Agnes is really kind. Caring for everyone like this must surely bring her many blessings." Mrs. Agnes replied with a cheerful smile. "I have to know how to be charitable, dear. Each month, I also offer plenty to the temple. Bring the pot here. I will serve you." "Yes, thank you, Miss Agnes." Feeling lucky to have met such a kind landlady, Roderick had been home for about a week when he constantly felt anxious. Right now, he was sleeping and kept hearing the sound of pigs squealing in his ears. He tossed and turned and then said to his wife, "Could you go see whose pigs are making such a loud noise at night?" Mrs. Daisy, roused from her sleep, half awake and half asleep, replied to her husband, "What pigs? There's no sound at all." "Are you dreaming?" Roderick was irritated. "I'm serious. I can clearly hear the pigs squealing." "Then you go check yourself." Frustrated, Roderick put on his slippers and turned on the porch light to check. There were no pigs. The yard was still empty and dark. Roderick thought to himself, "Strange, I can clearly hear that pig squealing." He closed the door, turned off the light, and returned to bed. At that moment, in the darkness, he saw glaring red eyes, wide open and terrifying. Perhaps the owners of those eyes had endured great suffering, which filled their gaze with so much resentment. A few days later, the sound of pigs being slaughtered kept echoing in Roderick's mind. It drove him insane. Unable to sleep, he sat up. His eyes were bloodshot and wild-looking, a frightening sight. Silently, he went down to the kitchen, took a sharp knife, and went outside. In his throat, he uttered strange, incomprehensible sounds. The knife in his hand moved on its own across his neck as he stabbed multiple times, blood spraying out vigorously from hitting a major artery. Roderick's eyes remained wild, but he did not stop there. He also took the knife and slashed down his belly. His lungs spilled out, a grotesque mess, and when he collapsed, his body contorted like a pig being slaughtered. His last utterances were merely incoherent sounds, and his eyes unconsciously flowed with tears. Blood soaked the yard from his neck. Roderick lay there cold and alone, with no one knowing. By dawn, Mrs. Daisy woke up and reached out to touch the side next to her. There was no one there, which struck her as strange, so she put on her slippers to look for him. She wondered where Roderick had gone. Although a farmer, he was known for sleeping in late. Every time he woke, she would call him to get up. She wandered around the house, then called out in the backyard but found nothing, so she headed to the front door, planning to grab a broom to sweep the leaves. When she opened the door, a horrifying scene met her eyes. making her body tremble and her mouth stammer. With great difficulty, she made it over to Roderick's body, her legs buckling as she touched him, his entire body already cold and stiff. She cried out in panic and sorrow. "Oh, my darling, what has happened to you? Is there anyone? Please save my husband." The neighbors heard the scream and rushed over to help. Those who were faint-hearted ran away immediately upon seeing the scene. The sad news had already been reported to his children, Ingrid and Selina, who quickly returned to their hometown. When they arrived home and stepped into the yard, they still saw blood lingering on the broad ground. They only received the news that their father had died, but were not informed of the gruesome details surrounding his death. Selina shuddered at the sight of her father lying on the ground, his position reminiscent of a dead pig. By the time the funeral service arrived, they had to hastily gather his remains before stitching him up again. Then they used alcohol to massage him multiple times until Mr. Roderick's muscles finally relaxed. Mrs. Daisy cried a lot, fainting many times. "Oh, my dear, what sinful act did you commit to meet such a tragic end? How could you leave me like this?" Seeing their mother in such pain, Ingrid and her brother could not hold back their emotions. Only those who have lost a beloved can truly understand the horrific pain it brings. The horrifying death of Mr. Roderick quickly spread far and wide. Those unaware would say he was just a drug addict. But those who knew recognized it as the karmic result of killing what one sows, so shall one reap. After Mr. Roderick was buried, Selina kept feeling nauseous. Although she was grieving deeply, Mrs. Daisy, noticing her daughter's discomfort, asked, "What's wrong, Selina?" "It's nothing, Mother. Come here and let me see." Mrs. Daisy took hold of Selina's shirt and pulled it aside, and upon seeing the changes in her daughter's body, she cried out, "My dear, what is this? Whose child is this?" Unable to hide it anymore, Selina finally confessed. Mrs. Daisy was worried about the gossip in the village, but she loved her daughter more. "Well, since it's come to this, I will give birth and raise my child. Your father has only just been buried. Perhaps he is watching over us and gave you this child as comfort." Thus, the two of them embraced and cried bitterly. After the funeral, Selina stayed in their hometown with her mother while Ingrid would bring their belongings back later. I wonder if this aligns with what the monk said before he passed away. The unusual deaths happening here, a murderer, a suicide, and even a mother who had just given birth a day ago, taking her own life. It truly is terrifying. Ingrid felt uneasy staying behind and decided to check out of her boarding house and return to stay with her mother and younger sister. Her sister was already noticeably pregnant, about 7 months along. Upon returning to her hometown, Ingrid began to observe the strange occurrences and told her mother and sister. Before, the young woman who appeared said to me that times are chaotic now. As long as we conduct ourselves honestly, we will get through. Now I see everyone killing each other for no apparent reason. It's too horrific, Mother. Our family should avoid contact with anyone. Close the gates tightly. Let's gather some supplies and stay inside for a while to see what happens. Upon hearing this, they felt anxious. Ingrid's mother spoke up. Is it really that serious, Ingrid? It might very well be, Mother. The next day, their family began to implement the plans that had been set. The front door was reinforced with wood, and they only left the back door to escape if necessary. The neighbors who saw this mocked them. What kind of living is this in today's world? They ignored it all. Mrs. Agnes, who thought she was virtuous, had actually lost her mind. She grabbed a knife and attacked her husband and children, as if she had no soul left and was just a puppet. She always screamed, "Go away, you all go away so I can be at peace." On her shoulders and neck, there were vengeful spirits clinging on, driving her into a frenzy and causing her hallucinations. Her husband and children were terrified and tied her up, fearing she would do something worse. But she continually screamed, even biting into her own flesh. They had to tape her mouth shut, thinking she was insane, so they took her to the mental hospital. Not long after, they heard the news that she had smashed her head against the wall and died. At the peak of the chaotic times, most people became unfathomably insane. They slaughtered and tore each other apart. Suddenly, passers-by dropped dead in the streets. The scene was terrifyingly chaotic, even inside the house. The screams outside induced fear. Some people came to bang on the door, trying aggressively to break into Ingrid's home, but it was futile. Inside, everyone was terrified. Even Ingrid clutched a pig-killing knife in her hand. Selina and her mother clung to each other in fear, merely reciting prayers. Boom, boom, the sound of thunder. The thunder was deafening, striking in the bright daylight. The sound was quite loud, but the lightning seemed to strike in a straight line, rather than curving as it naturally does. After the thunder, everything fell silent. Even Ingrid's usually strong heart felt like it could leap out of her chest. Ingrid slowly approached the door to peek outside. The people who had been trying to break into the house suddenly lay unmoving on the ground. He said to his mother, "I'm going outside to check. You just keep the door bolted." "No, my dear, don't go. I'm so scared." "It's fine. If anything happens, just keep the door bolted." Ingrid took the pig-slicing knife and cautiously made his way along the wall to the front. The two individuals lay sprawled out, motionless, their eyes rolled back with only the whites showing. Their bodies were festering, a foul stench rising as strange creatures crawled out slowly, abandoning their host. They quickly disappeared into the ground. He took a deep breath and went out to the street. Corpses littered the road, but alongside them were still some living people who remained conscious like him. Cries echoed, perhaps mourning their lost loved ones. It might also be cries born from sheer terror. Was it possible that the chaotic time the old woman's ghost mentioned had ended? Had the thunder just now sealed the gates of hell? Perhaps his father had paid for his sins when heaven wanted evil to cease. Later, Ingrid went to work, earning money, and he could take care of his mother. His sister also found someone who truly loved her. He began searching for the grave of the young woman, as he had received a dream about the location, so he went there. He invited a medium to perform a ritual to bring the young woman back. While praying, the spirit of the young woman entered Ingrid. He unconsciously stood up, limping towards the riverside. Then he knelt down, shouting, "I'm here. I died here." After saying this, Ingrid collapsed unconscious. The hired workers then resumed digging, and only after much effort did they find a skeleton wrapped in roots from a nearby tree. Ingrid took that skeleton back for a proper burial. Afterward, they called the spirit of the young woman again, asking if there were any lingering attachments. As soon as they called her spirit, the young woman proudly proclaimed, "You're lucky if I hadn't poured that rainwater away. You would have died without a trace." Ingrid asked, "What was in the rainwater?" "There was vengeful spirit in it. Anyone who drinks it will be cursed with karma." It was terrifying that day. Vengeful spirits were climbing up from the gates of hell. I was scared and had to hide away. "But why didn't you reincarnate?" Upon hearing this, The young woman cried profusely, her voice filled with grievance. I died unjustly. I was dragged by a ghost and drowned in the water. My fate isn't over yet, so here I hang around. Everyone had to comfort her for a long time before the young woman's spirit finally calmed down. She continued to sob softly. I regret not being able to save your father. When he was tormented by the vengeful pig spirit, I went to him, but those demons scared me. I was so scared. Being bitten by a demon means my soul would vanish, and I wouldn't be able to reincarnate. It was terrifying. Daisy, upon hearing Roderick's name mentioned, was in tears. The young woman then said, Don't cry anymore. That soul of Roderick has been dragged down to hell. Those pig demons took him away. He is paying for the karma he sowed. Well, just chant for him, and for me too. Remember that. Yes. Is there anything else you want me to do for you? Burn me a few red flower dresses. I really like them, so I can bless you. I won't go to the temple. When it's my time, I'll go. Yes. Remember that. I'm leaving. After that, the young woman's spirit departed, and the medium fell back, fainting. No one expected that the divine would filter good and evil in such a terrifying way. Well, as the young woman said, live kindly, and the divine will arrange. Dear friends, the story has come to an end. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. If you found this story interesting and helpful, please don't forget to support the narrator and Abyssal Murmurs by hitting like and leaving a comment. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss out on our upcoming captivating videos. Once again, thank you for your attention and support. Goodbye, and see you in the next videos.